welcome everybody. That's a nice backdrop. I'm guessing that's Manchester, or at least a CGI. At least a CGI.
It's a CGI of a new suburb to be in Manchester. Yeah, exactly.
And it's amazing, really, because I was at the launch that you did physically in Dubai. It's amazing. It's like increasing a already city by another 25%, isn't it? It's that big.
Yeah, it is. It's a big project. I mean, one of the reasons why we got involved on the initial phase was just because you can see the longevity in the project. Obviously we're talking about Victoria North here, and that's the master plan on that is, it's 15 to 20 years. The idea being, as you just said, to expand the city centre by some 27%, build 7 brand new suburbs, deliver 15,000 new homes to 40,000 new residents. And then with the, I'd say exciting, but actually needed addition of what will be Manchester's biggest green space in the City River Park.
Yeah, I mean, it's phenomenal. And what I do like is the fact there's one company, FEC, I'm sure you're going to touch on them later, that are in control of the whole thing. Not just the building, but also the parks, everything. It's not as if there are, like you might have in Dubai, for example, 20 different developers on the same site, all doing, working alongside each other. They've got ultimate control. It's amazing.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, obviously, this is not just an FEC project. It's a joint venture with the Manchester City Council, which probably one of the reasons why it has sold so well internationally, because as you know, Chris, based in the Middle East and mainly dealing with overseas buyers, one of the concerns they have is always, developer risk. And when you've got a developer that's JV'd with a local council and the drive is to expand the city limit, not just deliver one building, I think that gives people a lot of confidence. And as you rightly said, so we've lived in Dubai now for, over a decade, and you see these almost regeneration areas where you end up with multiple developers on site. And, whilst it's great sometimes for delivering those areas at speed, it's sometimes terrible to protect investors because everyone's competing on price. There's price wars, people undercutting each other, launching projects at a discount. And then in terms of the delivery of those buildings, as you may well know, if you've ever lived in the Marina or Business Bay, you end up moving into a building as a tenant, and then next minute there's another one being built right next door to you, so you end up in a building site for 2 years, or even worse, they built it halfway and then just stopped construction. So having one developer on site, it means that they can control the price point to protect all the investors, but also they can make sure that they systematically deliver the buildings to make sure they build the communities as they're doing it.
And they're doing it in phases. So like the backdrop behind you, I'm sure you're going to go into all the details now, but they're building it in phases. So one phase is done, then they go to the next phase. So nobody's actually going to be sitting and living while something's going on all around them, I guess.
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, you're never going to deliver maybe like 3 towers on the same day, but typically they have a window of 6 months where they're going to deliver blocks of 3, basically 3 towers phase 1, 3 towers phase 2, 3 towers phase 3, and so on and so on. So yeah, it just means they can deliver them, in a good time frame to make sure that, like say, those communities start to flourish before then they start moving on to new phases.
I thought a good question I'd ask is, at Holborn we launched Crown View 6 months ago under you, which is obviously in the same area, and that's been an amazing success. Moving on onto the next phase. Are there any units left there? And completion date, I guess, would be newer. What can you tell us about that for just people who maybe are interested?
Yeah, I mean, if I just do a share screen, Chris, is probably probably a good place for us to start, just in terms of that first phase. So, before we get into phase, think about the first suburb out of those 7 suburbs, which is Red Bank. So, for all intents and purposes, Red Bank will always be closest to the city centre in this whole master plan. It's very easily going to be engulfed as part of city centre, given it's only a 10-minute walk to Victoria Station, which is where you can access the train to Manchester Airport, train to Piccadilly, and the tram, which is the way most people tend to get around Manchester. If you walk past there, 5 minutes later, you're into like the city centre retail district, which is where you've got your Arndale Centre, your bars, restaurants, and other sort of commercial and retail outlets. So very, very much central. So Red Bank is really the first suburb of that whole master plan. And then if we dive down, as you mentioned, into phase 1, which was Victoria Riverside, That consisted of three towers. You had Park View, City View, Crown View. As you can see there, lots of sort of internal courtyards and city gardens, but right opposite the or onto the River and then opposite of the other side of that river will be the gateway into that City River Park. And why that's really, again, attractive and important is the biggest park at the moment in Manchester is about 4 acres. Upon completion, City River Park will be 113 acres. You know, a hyperloop cycle track around the whole thing. I know you're a man who likes to get out on a bike and cycle, so it would appeal to you. And the idea being is just to bring nature and city life together. So yeah, so those three towers got launched 24 months ago.
Just go back, just go back one slide, just with your cursor. Show us where that. Yeah, so the park is on the left-hand side, on the other side of the river.
Yeah, so if you can see, can you see my cursor there, Chris?
Yeah.
So that is the entrance doorway into Crown View, which is the tallest tower out of the three. Right here on the lip of this sort of river is where the bridge will be, and this will then be the entrance into that City River Park. Like, you literally couldn't be closer.
Yeah, fantastic.
So yeah, great location. That just gives you an idea of some of the delivery. And I always have this conversation with people about CGIs versus reality. And as you know, if you work in property, it's not always the case. But, you know, what you'll see there is right-hand side is the expectation of delivery CGI. And on the left-hand side is one of the units that's, you know, they're already going into Park View. And as a potential buyer, what you'll notice if you have been looking at property in the UK, most of them tend to have, you know, the smaller kind of windows built into wall. They open like 100 mil to like let a bit of fresh air in. There's nothing really that sexy about them. Whereas, you know, with these buildings, the way that they've put them together is it's almost like an etched shape. So you get these really cool dual aspect views over a park or a city, whichever direction you're facing. And then to sort of capitalize on those angles, you've got these massive floor to ceiling picture frame windows, which again, as a tenant would be quite cool to sit in that living room, look out, lots of light coming in the day. So the delivery on them is going to be spectacular. This was a video that I took back end of last year when I was on site, although they've moved forward a lot since then. But yeah, those three towers, City View sold out to one investor, Park View sold out within 12 months, and Crown View, which is the largest of the three, it's got a lot of the amenities in there. So you've got co-working space, private dining, state-of-the-art gym and fitness suites. That's got, I think we've got about 11 3-beds left in there as well. Completion date Q2 2025, and then at the same time you have 6 commercial activations on the high street, which will be, you know, bar, restaurant, convenience store, and then a few other things which I think are left to be tendered. So yeah, really cool in terms of the sales cycle of phase 1, and then the park section 1 is 2026. So you can imagine by 2026 all of a sudden you've got a fully fledged community in that first phase. So that's where we've been at so far in the journey.
It looks fabulous. Yeah. So on to phase 2 and where we are with Falcon. That is, I guess that's hidden behind your head, isn't it?
Yeah, just hidden right behind my head. I'll go back to sharing the screen. But yeah, as you mentioned, you know, because we launched this in Dubai, pre-launch pretty much before anybody globally got to see the unit. So we launched that. I think it was February the 7th, although could be mistaken. This year's gone so quick. Someone said to me the other day, "Can you call me back in a couple of weeks when we get into June?" And I went, "June? How the hell are we in June already?"
How are you going to remember that?
So yeah, so we launched in February, and from a sales perspective, it's been really strong. I think partly due to the payment plan and just really the opportunity. So you'll see on the screen there. So that phase 1 that we've just spoken about is on the right hand side. The third tower is kind of tucked behind Park View. You can't see because it's a smaller one. Obviously, we're now into phase 2, which will consist of three separate towers, and that small little green one, which I'll come on to in a second. And then obviously phase 3, which is the sort of more New York lofty style looking apartments. And obviously you've got a vantage point here of essentially being on the opposite side of the park, which is called and classed as the Red Bank Plateau. So that what you're looking at is Red Bank Riverside. All of those towers combined represent only 10% of the entire master plan. So just to give you an idea of the scale of the whole thing. So what you're looking at is about 10% of the master plan. On Red Bank Plateau, you'll have another sort of development to complete Red Bank, which will be smaller units, mainly more aimed at families, and then obviously all of that kind of congregated around the first phase of that park. So first tower launched in Red Bank Riverside will be Falcon, so what we did in February. Very different to phase one, so moving away from the sort of glass facade into the more sort of Manchester red brick, and still keeping with that etched style block. So you get these really cool dual aspect views. Within inside that phase, very, very clear to see they've gone to that, focus on nature and city life, lots of green space, courtyards, trees, plant life, and then nestled in amongst that will be a lot of your activations like your coffee shops, retail outlets, possibly a bar, etc. So, once completed, that neighbourhood will be very, very nice and pleasurable to live in. Internally, you've got Hawkins Brown, the leading architects and design firm in the UK. Again, same style of delivery, floor-to-ceiling picture frame windows, those big sort of grated slats that open to let a lot of ventilation into the apartments as well. So they're very, very cool in terms of the apartment delivery. 18 stories only, so not on a par with Crown View in terms of its 36 stories, but nonetheless some very, very cool units available within inside the building.
Do you know what I find? You've got it. What about that for timing? What I find exciting is the clubhouse. It looks extraordinary, and it's for residents only.
Yeah, so I mean, just before we talk about the clubhouse, I think it's probably good timing just to speak about, I guess, like the tenant makeup and what's going on in the UK, specifically in some of the bigger cities like Manchester. We've got a lot of the data in terms of rentals and tenancy purely because we have our own lettings and management business in Manchester. So, pre-COVID, you look at applications that come in for stock, and it didn't really matter about amenities, to be honest. People were at work 10, 11 hours a day, 5 days, if not 6 days a week. As long as it had a door, 4 walls and a window, people were fairly happy. Now, post-COVID, where people are hybrid working or they're full-time working from home, the drive and the request for amenities, even down to something basic, like has it got a gym, has it got any courtyard? And there's not a huge amount of stock in Manchester that does hold a lot of high-end amenities. So FEC have really listened to that tenant profile, and this will be the first time it's ever been done whereby you'll have a purpose-built clubhouse built within a phase of a development. So this, in total, you've got 24,000 square foot of building and space, of which 16,000 is usable. Every single tenant within Falcon will have access to clubhouse as well at no cost. You've got 24-hour concierge. You have your residence lounge, which consists of obviously breakout areas, private dining, and co-working space. Idea being there is rather than working in your apartment and getting stuffy and bored, you can actually then start to become part of a community, which I think is exceptional. State-of-the-art fitness suite, including a high-tech gym, yoga studio, and then you have a bar and restaurant on the top floor. So they are the core amenities that have been promised. However, you've probably worked out if you know your space, that probably won't scratch the surface of 16,000 square foot of usable space. So there are conversations currently taking place about putting in a paddle court, beauty salons, additional amenities that would work within that kind of community, but they won't make the decisions on that until they get closer to completion so they can see what's on trend. But yeah, I mean, a spectacular addition to a new phase in a new suburb, really sort of benchmarking where the tenants are currently focused in Manchester.
Well, a question's just come in, Greg. You mentioned just then and profile. That's a lot of building going up. We know about North Shoring, people coming out of London, big companies coming out of London and going up to Manchester. What is it that you see and you hear on the grapevine as to what's happening up there in Manchester and where the tenant's going to come from?
Yeah, good question. I mean, you kind of hit part of the nail on the head there with the sort of, we class it as like a domestic migration from London to Manchester. It's quite interesting for me, coming from Stoke, and I know Manchester very well. And if we're having this conversation 15 years ago, you just wouldn't be talking about FTSE 100 companies being based in Manchester, right? But And now you've got 80% of the FTSE 100 companies based in Manchester, and growing every single year. Those businesses themselves are growing, they're expanding, and therefore they need to attract staff. So the estimations from the city council are over the next 10 years, you're going to have 58,000 people, minimum 58,000 descending on the city centre. Those 58,000 people are going to need somewhere to live. And again, if they're coming to work for FTSE 100 listed companies, they are some degree of professional. They're going to want to live in somewhere that's relatively new, shiny, and with those amenities. So that's where we think, Red Bank Riverside and Victoria Riverside, that whole Red Bank neighbourhood is going to stand out, because people can go and live in these buildings, which are heavily amenitized, and be in the city centre within 15 minutes walk.
Well, what's on that plot now, may I ask? Are homes being taken down and therefore people are going to be rehoused? Is that how it works, or was it just brownfield site?
Over the whole site, it's kind of a mixed bag. So where Red Bank Riverside is, there's a lot more sort of factories and brownfield that they're going to pull down, and then there's going to be parts of the master plan where they will obviously rehouse people. And again, making sure that they look after those communities as well. And that's a big driver for the city council, to make sure not only do they deliver this kind of stock, but also that they make, some form of affordable housing that pacifies and makes it really accessible for those people already living in those communities.
I mean, the good thing for Manchester is they've got Andy Burnham, who's the mayor.
Just been re-elected as well.
Yeah, and he's everywhere in the news. He's tipped to get the big job down in London, isn't he? He's just everywhere on the news. It's good to have a mayor like that who's just so hands-on and doing what he's doing for Manchester. It's amazing. I mean, I think you've got two good football teams up there. You've got Manchester City and Stockport County, two major football teams. So, there's a lot of people go out there. Right, what's on the next slide, Greg?
It's interesting you mentioned about football, Chris. Actually, I did an article the other day about the impact of Man City and Man United just on the city of Manchester, and it's incredible when you work through the numbers and you look at the amount of revenue that just that club brings in alone, and the amount of jobs that those clubs bring in, and then not just that, just the global eyeballs that is placed onto Manchester by having those two clubs. I mean, United could probably do with picking up the pace a little bit, but it's two big powerhouses that it makes Manchester very globally recognisable, which again I think is important when you're considering an investment location. So what's next on the slide? So this one I sort of just zoom out just to give people an idea on proximity again. So we touched on that phase one and its location, but Red Bank Riverside, which is where Falcon is going to be. Again, you're right in front of the River Irk. You're on that park, and then you've got the Red Bank Plateau on the opposite side. And the reason I show this is because ultimately, as an investor coming into Falcon or in in building 2 within phase 2, or in Crown View in phase 1, you are essentially owning an apartment on what will be actually Manchester's biggest park. As I said, with the idea to kind of bring a Hyde Park, Central Park to Manchester. And I know Manchester isn't London, but if we've learned one thing from London from a property standpoint, it's try and own real estate close to or on top of a park, because the difference in premium, the value of a property that's located on a park versus not, as you can see on that sort of screen there, can be astronomical. And obviously we can't put an exact figure on it, but it is fair to say if you look across the UK and across countries globally, if you own real estate that's close to or next to a park, it's generally valued better than if it's not. So I do think this is a phenomenal opportunity to get into something early, which will end up with you located on top of Manchester's biggest park.
Yeah, I think a good comparison would be going back to Dubai and anyone that's got water view, whether it be downtown or the marina or the Palm, obviously, there's always a premium if somebody's got water. And I think the same in the UK with a park, especially with families. But listen, it's a huge park, isn't it? When you actually look at it, it's a massive park.
Yeah, it's needed though. Like I say, Manchester doesn't have, it's quite a dense city as it is right now. It doesn't have a lot of green space. And again, we live in a post-COVID world where people, they do want to be outdoors more. They do want to exercise. They don't want to be cooped up all the time. They probably spend a lot of time working at home. They want to get out and, to have this opportunity to go into that city river park and enjoy days out with the family, go and exercise there. They want it as a destination. So just again by proximity being located on top of that park, you are going to have eyeballs on your development, which is always good. And it's also the reason why they're very focused on making sure there's really good commercial activations down that Danzig Street. So good restaurants, good bars, good coffee shops, good retail outlets. It's going to be a very, very cool, special part of Manchester. We really look forward to seeing it kind of come to life. And I think that's how it kicked off the seminar in Dubai. It's like, this is not necessarily just invested into one building. It's actually about investing into a story of how
I don't know why this happens. Sorry, Greg, I'm interrupting. I don't know why this happens, but whenever you show a video, your voice goes like a Dalek. It breaks up a bit. But so it just seems to be when you show a video. Have a speak now.
Yeah, well, it's an automatic video, so I don't know why I do that. But
no,
is that any better?
It's clear now. But I suppose we need to go back to that because we need to talk about prices. Sorry, I just thought I'd let you know.
Yeah, no, that's cool. That's cool. I'll go back. But like I say, what I was saying, Chris, is like by investing into like Falcon or any of these phases, you are investing into a story, not just building, and you are on for a 50-20 year potential ride of growth. Because that's how long the project's going to take in total. And you are ultimately investing in something that's going to change the landscape of Manchester. So yeah, no, it's a mega exciting project. In terms of so you can see that now, Chris. Can you hear me okay then whilst I'm speaking now? Not because I can't pause.
I can now. It just seems to be when the video's running, you sound like a Dalek, so you can get a job with Doctor Who.
No worries. So yeah, obviously 18 floors. I think let's first focus on, completion date here. So completion date is Q2 2027. Now, typically we wouldn't ever take on a project that's got that length in terms of completion. Normally we're sort of 18 months, 24 max. But obviously we feel extremely comfortable with this as it's part of a longer term master plan and it's very much staged on how they deliver these phases. Also comfortable with the fact that FEC being the size they are guaranteeing all of the deposits for clients as well. So you've got zero downside on your deposits. So that's fully protected, which I think again is quite
important, Greg. And I think you should need to emphasize that. That doesn't come with every development. That is 100% your deposit, which is guaranteed in the event of something catastrophic happening, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's rare. Not you'll see it often of like 50% insured, but never really 100% of your deposit protected. So yeah, you've got full protection, which is nice. And again, I think that's why overseas investors have taken that leap and have that confidence. You got your one bed starting from sort of 285. Most of those have been bought by end users in the UK. Most of the investors tend to gravitate towards two beds. Your deposit really on 10% isn't that much difference. The price per square foot makes a bit more sense. You get the extra bedroom, so you can get the extra rental. And one would say sometimes they do typically sell better on the secondary market. There was 2-3 beds only in the development. They sold pretty much on day one. Rental yields expected about 6%, which again is strong for that price point and for a big major city, versus London where you're struggling to get 3 or 4 out most of the time. Important to note, there's no short-term lets available, so can't like Airbnb this. The idea being again is they want to create a community, not a holiday park. So again, it protects all of those tenants that are using the facilities and clubhouse and whatnot. And then from a deposit structure for Holborn and a couple of other firms we work with, we have got an agreement of flexibility on that deposit. So rather than 10% year one, 10% year two, we could, if somebody wanted it, to do 10% year one, 5% year two, 5% year three, and then the balance on completion Q2 2027, making it even better on someone's cash flow if they wanted to look at units.
Good time, Greg, with that slide up there to talk about mortgages, because it's obviously a hot subject. Rates, everybody thinks are going to start coming down when the bank base rate drops down below 5. At the moment, we're talking about, and everybody's different. It's I caveat it based subject to status, but I talk about 65%, 70% mortgages. And I'm talking at the moment, depending where you are in the world. Obviously, we've got clients all over the world. at 6 to 6.5, Greg. Is that where you are at the moment on mortgages?
Yeah, for most, look, I think if somebody's buying today and it's completing today, that's probably what you want to be looking at, about 6.5%. Obviously, if you're a UK resident, it's less than that. And I think, we're still waiting for the international mortgages to sort of catch up on that downturn, which we're starting to see slowly but surely. Obviously, for anyone buying off plan, people use the terminology kicking the can down the road. I don't tend to like that, but essentially you're delaying the conversation around mortgages and you're waiting for, Bank of England to start reducing rates. So, when Falcon hands over Q2 2027, I mean, obviously it's a thumbsuck and it's a guess, but, one would, based on economics, suggest that it's going to be less than 6.5%. But yeah, I mean, depends on where you are, mate. I mean, there's some countries whereby it is slightly more, there's some countries where it's slightly less, but I think if you're cash flowing, 6.5% for somebody completing on a property now, you're probably in the right region. If it's in 2027, you could probably cash flow 5.5% and still be relatively confident on that.
We always say every week we have a mortgage broker. In fact, we have more than one mortgage broker, and it's always a good idea to get in touch with them straight away. We'd always urge people to do that. You're going to get an offer in principle. That your situation, you and your wife, your family, your job, etc., will say, yeah, okay, you're good, all things being equal, for 65%, and the rate would be at the current time, say 6.5. So, we urge you, and with all wealth managers, all clients, to get that done. You've got, I mean, for somebody who wants to look longer term, right? For somebody who wants to look shorter term, still got a bit of Crown View left.
Yeah, so Crown View, we've got 11 3-beds left. So price points 475 upwards,
Okay.
and sort of dotted from floor 13 up to floor 32. So there's some really good aspects and good units there. Yeah.
So I mean, all 1s and 2s have sold.
Yeah, all gone.
Wow. Well, that's a good indication. So then we've got obviously Falcon, which is 2027.
Yeah.
For somebody who's looking further beyond, I don't urge it, but I would rather. By the way, everybody out there, Greg and I were lucky. We got a lead earlier this week, and we sold 2 Falcons in a day. So Greg and I were absolutely delighted with that. Greg, I think you can see the irony on that one. And so somebody who wanted to kick the can down the road a bit further, Greg.
Yeah.
Next stage, or is it too early to be talking about that? Is that a silly thing to say?
No, not too early. I mean, like I said, the success of Falcon since we launched has been astronomical, really, from a UK standpoint. So we're about 60 to 70% sold at the moment. We won't sell 100%, obviously, to investors, because you need some, end users in there as well to make sure mortgages are okay. So, we are, for all intents and purposes, coming to the sort of semi back end of sales, really, on Falcon. But like I said, there's still some decent units available. As I said, in terms of delivery of phases, they'll do phase 2 similar to phase 1, which is within 6 months of each other. So we're looking to go to market with the second building in phase 2 probably around about August, September. So again, if you've got clients maybe that right now isn't the right time for them, and they want to get summer out of the way and then come back and look at something, then August, September they could be getting first refusal on units within that second tower.
Right, but we'll concentrate for the moment on anybody that's got a 3-bed. Let's go Crown, and anybody that's a 1 or a 2-bed. And I urge, 2 beds are always better. I've got a little saying, 2 sayings, but one saying is, if you can afford a 2-bed, go for a 2-bed. I think they build accordingly, don't they? They build more 2-beds than they do 1-beds, and more 1-beds than they do 3-beds. But I've just got a message in here for somebody. Good morning. I'm enjoying the Falcon presentation. A few of my prospects could not make it. Can you send me the recording? I haven't even finished yet, Harsha. We haven't finished. So yes, there will be a recording available, and it will be on our website. So that's great. So anything else, Greg, that you want to talk about, either generally on the market or on Falcon?
No, look, I think we've covered most of it. I mean, look, if anybody's looking to invest into Manchester, obviously you've got choice, right? There's quite a few projects out there at the moment, and a lot of them have taken the same aspects of FEC, which is focus on amenities, focus on facilities. For me, I'll just go back to that, point about investing into a story. On a comparison basis, I think price per square foot, we are slightly cheaper than some other projects. But this is one way you look at it and go, there's a lot of long-term growth here. So for me, this is really the best of the bunch in Manchester. I'm more than happy to get on calls individually with clients, with advisors, make sure we run through the unit specs, the unit types, which angles they face, which direction they're going to look at, what floor they're on. Look at service fees, look at cash flows. So again, we want to be as transparent as possible. Look at the total cost of purchase, including, your stamp duty, legal fees, everything else that goes into purchasing in the UK. So yeah, look, it's a great project. It's investing into the future of Manchester. Obviously, we're really looking forward to getting, the sales done in Falcon and then moving on to building 2. But yeah, mate, I appreciate the time jumping on the call, and clients won't go wrong with this one, that's for
sure. One other thing, we do actually have a cash flow. So if somebody is interested, say on a £300,000 unit, we can actually factor in what the rental is going to be estimated to be, what the stamp duty is going to be, given your specific situation. We'd obviously go with interest rates as they are now. It's a bit of a caveat there. And the cash flow is really comprehensive. Greg just mentioned the ancillary costs, stamp duty, cost of solicitors, valuation fees. When I ask that question, I always answer it one simple way. I say, do you know what? You're not going to go far wrong with about 8% of the purchase price. You're not going to go far wrong. Depending on stamp duty and everyone's specific situation. But I would say, okay, if the purchase price is 300,000, you're going to need another 8%. So that's what I use generally. So we've got wealth managers on. We've got a fair number of clients on. So clients, please go back to the person who referred you to the webinar. If not, obviously contact Holborn, and I'll put you on to Greg. And as Greg said, both he, I, your wealth manager, are more than happy to jump on any call and go through it again and talk about individual units, because Greg's absolutely right. Is it going to be better to be on the 14th floor or the 8th floor, looking south or southwest or over the park or over the city, overlooking Manchester City football ground, so you get a free view of every game? I'm sure that's true. Okay, everybody, thank you very much. Thank you, Greg.